Hey there, I'm Jerry, a DIY track guy, and today we're going to work on a mod that I've wanted to do since before the engine swap. It's going to be pretty epic. So brace yourself. These are R-Theory Motorsports cross braces, or in Flyin Miata speak, butterfly braces. These are pretty heavy, so I'm going to put them down. These cross braces were designed to bolt up directly to the mounting points of R-Theory Motorsports frame rail braces, which I installed in one of my very first videos almost 3 years ago back in 2022. Link to that video is up here. But these cross braces are also compatible with other manufacturers' frame rail braces. You just need to drill a few holes in these guys to line up with your frame rail bolts. Links to the R-Theory frame rail braces and cross braces are in the description. They also fit with adequate clearance to most Miata exhaust systems, but since my exhaust isn't routed to the standard Miata location, I expect some modifications will be required. The cross brace kit includes 2 braces. The smaller one goes at the front and the larger one at the rear, and they've been carefully designed not to affect ground clearance as they only hang as low as the frame rails themselves. Finally, it's worth noting that the large brace shown here is actually a pre-production prototype version that I got from Rajan for a deal because I knew it might need extensive modification. The production braces look like the smaller brace here with the beefier welds and the full structural X ribs. So let's go ahead and get these bad boys installed. First up is to get under the car, of course ensuring it's seated safely and securely on jack stands, or if you have access to a vehicle lift, this job will be super easy and I don't like you. I've got a steel-braided PTFE fuel line and a new power cable running up the inside of the left frame rail. So I remove the wire holders I used to secure them and free up the line from the frame rail bolts. But on your Miata, you shouldn't have anything here. Similarly, on the right frame rail, I free up the wire holders from my rear brake hardline, but you should have 4 hardlines here: brakes, fuel send, fuel return, and a fuel vent line. Now I can test fit the larger rear brace to make sure it lines up with the 3 rear frame rail bolts. Notice that the brace has one side with a wide mounting plate and the other with a narrow one. It's designed for the wide side to go on the right frame rail to allow clearance for those 4 hard lines. Because this is a prototype, a couple of the holes don't line up perfectly and need to be elongated, so I mark those with a Sharpie. Also, since I'm running a custom 2.5-inch exhaust, it's interfering slightly with the cross brace's structural ribs. Needless to say, for your stock Miata exhaust or your typical aftermarket exhaust system, there should be ample clearance and no modification is required. And of course, the bolt holes will line up with the R-Theory frame rail bolts, or if you're running another manufacturer's frame rails, you'll need to drill out the holes in the appropriate locations. Alright, here we are in my backyard, and I need to enlarge some of these holes here where the bolts don't exactly line up. The next spot is to enlarge these cutouts here. If I hit this, these ones here. We'll see if this fits up. I might need to do a little bit more trimming, but you get the idea of what's necessary here. Back under the car, I removed the 3 rear frame rail nuts on both sides, taking care not to lose them. Then position the cross brace and refasten those nuts and washers. And there we go, the rear cross brace is in with minimal fuss other than that bit of cutting and grinding. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for the front brace. As mentioned, my Ecotec engine swap requires a custom exhaust system because the exhaust manifold's on the right side of the engine compartment versus the left for a standard Miata motor. That means the exhaust needs to be routed under the transmission back over to the left side like a standard Miata exhaust. So that said, the front brace won't clear the exhaust, but after talking with R-Theory Rajan, he suggested I use M8 coupler nuts like this to space it down and hopefully buy enough clearance. Alright, so here we are at the front again, and using these coupler nuts, I could just thread them on like this. And then it would space the cross brace down exactly 25 mil, and that should be more than enough clearance to my exhaust. This could go like this, but this plate here is really far down compared to the frame rail here. Instead, what I like to do is remove this nut that goes to this frame rail bolt and replace it with the coupler nut. So now if we put this here, it'll space it down a little bit less. Let's work on the other side. This is the lowest thing on the car now. And here's what that front brace looks like installed with those 25mm coupler nuts. It's spaced down about 20mm below the frame rails, which is great for the exhaust because now it's got clearance for days. However, I'm not happy with the bolts and stack of washers I had to use. The shortest bolts I had were 25mm and there was only about 10mm of thread in those coupler nuts. But anyways, with a bit of MacGyvering, the cross braces are now fitted front and rear, and I think we should go for a test drive. Slow speed bumps feel like the chassis is kind of more rigid. I don't know how else to say it. It just feels like it's more solid together. Okay, going about 40 kilometers here. Let's take this roundabout. Yeah, even though I spaced it up on those coupler nuts, and I cut out a bunch of the structural pieces of that cross brace, it's still doing something. Yeah, the chassis just feels more darty, like the front and rear are connected more. Wow, I wasn't expecting this. Yeah, obviously driving like this, just at a steady state cruise, not really feeling any difference. Here's a little spot. Yeah, okay. Over a bump like that, where it's really sharp, definitely feel that the flex of the chassis is still there. So that was a successful test drive, but check out how low the front cross brace is hanging. It's a little concerning, so I've got another idea. These are M8 stainless steel carriage bolts 45mm long that will replace the 25mm carriage bolts that secure the frame rails to the chassis. That extra 20mm will let me use a few of these stainless steel washers to shim up the cross brace to only about 10mm below the frame rails. But that means the seats and carpets need to come up to replace them. And that exposes these stainless steel R-Theory frame rail backing plates. These are a unique product I haven't seen offered from other frame rail vendors. They act as a large washer to distribute the load of the frame rail hardware and also hold the carriage bolts captive in the slotted holes to ease installation. With the new M8 carriage bolts installed with the original nuts and washers, now I can add 2 washers to space the cross brace down just enough to clear the exhaust. And now the brace sits at a more reasonable 8 to 9mm below the frame rails. Awesome. Alright, here we are on a country drive up a highway known as 507. Just having a nice fall drive here in Ontario, Canada. So to get here, I had to drive about 2 hours, and I've already noticed that the exhaust clearance to those cross braces is not enough. It is rattling quite badly. Not enough that I feel like it's causing any damage to anything, but enough that it's annoying. I also want to feel how the car behaves around some tighter turns and that kind of stuff. This is not a canyon. This is not a toge. This is just out for a nice drive. Although I'm a self-diagnosed track rat, I do find a nice country drive with the top down on a crisp autumn day is simply lovely. This is the Haliburton area northeast of Toronto, and it's one of the few places I know that has curvy flowing roads with a decent speed limit. If you have any recommendations of others, please leave a comment. But back to those cross braces. For street driving, they make quite a noticeable difference in reducing vibrations and increasing the solid feeling of my floppy 90s convertible. And that's on top of my existing chassis mods, frame rail braces, fender braces, roll bar, and rear subframe brace. I've made videos about each of those things. Check out the playlist in the top right corner. As an aside, I understand that apart from these mods, there are at least 3 other things that can be done to go even further. An OEM hardtop, although only made of fiberglass, will help reduce NVH, that's well documented. Door bars, like the ones offered by Hard Dog that are compatible with their roll bars, add significantly more structure to the center of the car. And finally, this one's not for the faint of heart, seam welding the car is also well known to make a big difference. Back in the garage, I pulled the front cross brace to investigate those terrible rattling noises from my otherwise peaceful country drive, and found this. Right here is a slight witness mark where the brace was contacting the exhaust pipe. Thankfully, it sounded worse than it actually was, and it's an easy fix. On the cross brace here, I marked where a bit more material needs to be cut off. And back on the car, now the exhaust has lots of clearance in that area. As well, here's another look at the ground clearance with the brace hanging 8 to 9 millimeters below the frame rails. It's barely noticeable. And there's only one last thing to do to round out this install and review video to make it even longer. Let's take it to the track. Alright, so here I am at a surprisingly busy Friday morning day session at Toronto Motorsports Park. And I just did a warm-up session. It's pretty cold out. Temperature today is about 9 or 10 degrees, but we're going to get a high of about 23. Track seems pretty slippery, and the car feels really slippery. So after installing those cross braces, now that I got those in properly, the car feels very tail happy. Just to recap my suspension, I have Flyin Miata VMAX track coilovers, which are not track rated. I also have the Flyin Miata front and rear anti-roll bars, the anti-sway bars, and I've set them to max, the max settings front and rear. Tire pressures may also be a problem. I went out there with 25 PSI cold all around, and when I came in, the rears were at 32 PSI, which is kind of a lot. The fronts were only about 30. The lap timer says I did a 123, but I think that's an error. I was running in the 125s or so, so not quite at my PB of a 23.7, but I think there's more time in the car, and hopefully as the day warms up, the track will get a little grippier. So let's see how we can do. And time was pretty hard to come by out there, with the car being more prone to oversteer than usual, which was actually really fun. But I did manage this lap. and that's a 1:23.6, which is about 0.2 faster than my previous fastest lap from a few months ago. So these R-Theory Motorsports cross braces, along with my other chassis mods, have increased the rigidity of my Miata such that it's exposed a weakness in another area. Namely, my Flyin Miata VMAX Extreme coilovers are too undersprung and too underdamped to go any faster on this racetrack. Now, it goes without saying that when it comes to racing, the whole point of a race car is to produce the fastest lap times possible, because adding weight to a race car that doesn't improve lap times is a waste. As we just saw, this mod didn't make the car objectively any faster, but this isn't a race car. And for those of us straddling both worlds of street and track, the counterpoint to the adding weight is bad and lap time is king laser focus is feel. Does this mod make me feel better about driving my car, and does it make me want to drive it more? I think it's pretty clear for these cross braces, my answer is hell yeah. So until next time, you're awesome, I'm useless, thanks for watching.